The flickering glow of torches casts long, trembling shadows across the cold stone altar, its surface slick with dark, drying blood. A warrior lies bound, his breaths ragged and shallow, eyes wide with terror. The chilling silence is shattered by the rasp of an iron blade, cold, sharp, merciless as it slices deep into flesh, peeling back skin and sinew to expose the spine beneath. Close-up reveals the gruesome precision. Ribs severed from spine to shoulder, each crack a brutal echo in the cavernous fjord. Lungs are pulled free, wet and glistening, draped across the victim's back like macabre wings. The executioner, clad in furs and iron, steps back, his axe dripping crimson. The embodiment of Viking wrath and unyielding justice. The air is thick with the wet, sucking sound of flesh torn apart, mingled with the victim's final, strangled roar that reverberates against the jagged rock walls. The scene lingers, raw and haunting. Narration in tones. Picture a sacrificial altar, slick with blood, a bound warrior gasping for breath, and then with a scream that echoes through the fjords. His ribs are severed from spine to shoulder, lungs pulled free to drape across his back like bloody wings. This was the Blood Eagle, the execution so savage it was said to be reserved only for the greatest traitors and the most ruthless kings. Tonight, we unmask the bloodiest secret of Viking justice and the horror that still haunts legend. Pre-dawn mist coils softly around a hilltop altar, its black stone slick with dew that catches the faintest light. Ravens, silent and watchful, perch on jagged branches nearby, their croaks piercing the cold air, adding a haunting soundtrack to the first whispers of ritual chant. The scent of smoldering wood mingles with the damp earth, wrapping the scene in a charged, foreboding atmosphere. Eric, the condemned, bound tightly with braided leather ropes, staggers upward on uneven stone steps worn smooth by time. His armor clinks with every labored breath, fear and exhaustion etched across his face. At the summit, Bjorn the executioner waits resolute, axe poised, its blade catching the dawn's pale glow. His eyes are steady, shadowed with solemn duty. As Eric struggles, the murmured chant swells. Bjorn's voice rises in a prayer to Odin. Let his spirit bleed for your glory. The clash of metal and the rasp of desperate breaths fill the tension-laden air. With a swift, brutal motion, Bjorn's axe descends, the crack of bone tearing through the morning stillness. Eric's scream rips the silence raw, agonizing, a desperate offering. The executioner's hands find the severed ribs, hooking them with grim precision. Slowly, he pulls outward, exposing lungs that unfold like bloody wings against the breaking sky. The ravens cry out, their calls weaving into the chant as if accepting the grim pact sealed in blood and pain. The scene cuts to black as Eric's final breath echoes a haunting reminder of sacrifice made in the name of divine justice and the merciless will of the gods. Today, the sight of a death row chamber evokes clinical sterility. Soft, white lights illuminate smooth walls where medical equipment stands ready to deliver a supposedly painless end. Guards move with quiet precision, their footsteps muffled as hidden cameras record every moment. The faint hum of machines and the antiseptic scent permeate the air, creating an atmosphere of solemn efficiency. Yet, behind this calm veneer lies the gravity of a state-sanctioned death, a quiet but profound finality. Contrast this with a Viking thing-gathering, open-air amphitheater glowing with torchlight, where crowds gather in raucous assembly. The condemned is dragged forward in heavy chains, the air thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and anticipation. Voices shout chants, the drum of ritual beats echoing in the cold night. Here, justice is not hushed but raw and brutal, a sacred performance of vengeance and divine wrath. No anesthesia dulls the pain. No mercy tempers the spectacle. The execution, especially the infamous Blood Eagle, is etched not only on flesh but into saga and stone memories carved deep to warn and awe. As modern societies wrestle with the ethics of capital punishment, the Vikings wielded execution as an instrument of cosmic balancer ritual that fused justice with vengeance. Scenes of modern legal debates intercut with reenactments of the Blood Eagle reveal a stark duality: the clash of civilized restraint and primal ritual. The anguished cries of the condemned echo alongside the solemn stillness of a courtroom, reminding us that punishment is both a public spectacle and a deeply personal ordeal. In their world, justice was not merely enforcement but devotion, a terrifying, unflinching testament to order maintained through fear and sacrifice. The Blood Eagle's terrifying legacy emerges from the vivid pages of saga literature, such as the Orkneyinga saga and saga. These ancient texts recount the fates of warriors and kings subjected to this grisly execution, where traitors were ritually dismembered to offer their wings to Odin's raven messengers. The sagas blend history and myth, weaving narratives that codify justice through both blood and dread. Illuminated manuscripts flicker with candlelight as scenes of ritual violence unfold, emphasizing the rite's chilling place in Viking lore. Saga authors served not only as storytellers but as chroniclers, encoding legal and spiritual codes through these brutal tales that resonated deeply in their culture. Modern scholars and forensic experts wrestle with the question: could the Blood Eagle truly have been performed as described? Anatomical studies and 3D reconstructions reveal the grisly mechanic's ribs severed from spine to shoulder, lungs pulled free to form bloody wings. Surgical tools of the era, body positioning, and medical knowledge suggest this horrifying act was possible, if unimaginably cruel. Forensic anthropologists propose that victims could survive minutes during the ordeal, extending their agony and amplifying the ritual's terror. Medical illustrations juxtapose executioners' blades with exposed anatomy, giving grim insight into the precision and brutality intertwined in the rite. Modern scholars and forensic experts wrestle with the question: could the Blood Eagle truly have been performed as described? Anatomical studies and 3D reconstructions reveal the grisly mechanic's ribs severed from spine to shoulder, lungs pulled free to form bloody wings. Surgical tools of the era, body positioning, and medical knowledge suggest this horrifying act was possible, if unimaginably cruel. Forensic anthropologists propose that victims could survive minutes during the ordeal, extending their agony and amplifying the ritual's terror. Medical illustrations juxtapose executioners' blades with exposed anatomy, giving grim insight into the precision and brutality intertwined in the rite. More than mere punishment, the Blood Eagle was a sacred sacrifice to Odin the Raven God, embodying war, death, and divine hunger. Spilled blood nourished his raven messengers, while the exposed lungs symbolized the wings of these dark birds soaring into the afterlife. Ravens wheel ominously in stormy skies, as animations depict blood flowing like life force toward raven feathers, binding the physical violence to spiritual devotion. The crackle of funeral fires and the harsh call of ravens fill the air, mingling with the metallic scent of spilled blood, drawing the viewer into the ritual's haunting atmosphere. This brutal execution was also political theater, designed to bind loyalty through fear. Public spectacles like the Blood Eagle broadcast a clear, unforgiving message. Betrayal would summon divine wrath and provoke public horror. Crowds gathered under fluttering banners, chieftains presiding with stern faces as the condemned met their gruesome fate. the razor-thin line between justice and terror. Power and paranoia were sharpened in these rites where spectacle was as vital as sentence, and loyalty forged in the shadow of blood. The Blood Eagle's dark legacy emerges most vividly through saga literature, where oral histories became epic verses echoing through Viking halls. The Orkneyinga saga recounts the chilling tale of Earl Torfina executing Halfdan with this brutal right ribs severed and lungs pulled free to form bloody wings. Similarly, saga tells of Avenda delivering grisly justice upon King Br, illustrating the ritual's sacred and terrifying role. These texts paint the execution as a public spectacle, a ritualized act blending raw brutality with sacred symbolism. But they are more than mere accounts. Saga authors encoded layers of meaning, mixing history with myth and political messaging. The ritual was a powerful tool, embedding fear and reverence into Viking culture through vivid storytelling. Illuminated manuscripts flicker with candlelight as scenes unfold. Warriors bound, executioners poised, and ravens circling each stroke, reinforcing the ritual's enduring and haunting imprint on Norse memory. Scholars and forensic experts have scrutinized the saga descriptions, asking whether the Blood Eagle could truly have been performed. Anatomical reconstructions reveal the gruesome mechanics. Ribs would be severed from the spine in a downward cut, muscles sliced to expose the lungs, which were then pulled out to resemble wings, an act requiring terrifying precision. Medical illustrations display muscle layers and rib connections, alongside Viking-era tools, axes, knives, and hooks that might have been used. Experts debate the required force and positioning. The procedure, while horrifying, appears physically possible given the tools and knowledge available. Forensic anthropologists suggest victims likely survived for several agonizing minutes, amplifying the execution's ritual terror and symbolic potency. This extended suffering was integral, transforming execution into a prolonged spectacle. The medical perspective lends chilling realism to the saga's vivid language, revealing an intersection of surgical skill and ritualized brutality unique to Viking justice. Despite saga's detailed accounts, physical archaeological evidence for the Blood Eagle remains elusive. No discovered Viking skeleton exhibits definitive signs of ribs forcibly removed or lung exposure consistent with the ritual. Excavations of grave sites show well-preserved bones, but lack the characteristic winged marks that the saga describes. Archaeologists carefully examine skeletal remains under microscopes, searching for trace cut marks or unusual bone separations, yet find none conclusively linked to the Blood Eagle. Some scholars argue that soft tissue damage and burial practices, rapid decay, or deliberate concealment could erase evidence over centuries. Others caution that saga authors might have used metaphor or exaggeration, turning symbolic imagery into gruesome legend. This ongoing debate exemplifies the challenge of interpreting ancient oral traditions through the fragmented lens of archaeology. The absence of clear physical proof leaves room for skepticism, but does not entirely discount the ritual's historic reality. Given its profound cultural presence in Norse storytelling, beyond punishment, the Blood Eagle served as potent political theatre. The brutal death of King Glavenged by the Viking leader Ivar, the boneless through the ritual, was a statement etched in blood and bone. This execution became a symbol of divine justice and retribution, reinforcing power dynamics in a culture where violence and spectacle governed legitimacy. Dramatic reenactments show battlefield clashes and chieftains swearing fealty beneath fluttering banners, setting the stage for executions designed to awe and terrify. Public ritualized killings sent clear messages. betrayal would summon not only mortal retribution, but cosmic wrath from Odin himself. These acts were performative, binding the social order through fear and spectacle. The ritual's visibility consolidated power, warning rivals and securing loyalty among followers. The blood eagle thus fused legal punishment with theatrical display, a grim reminder that Viking kingship was as much about perception and terror as it was about lineage and governance. Dr. Freya Lundquist, a forensic anthropologist, reflects on the elusive evidence, stating, "While no skeletons definitively show blood eagle marks, the saga's consistency suggests a real, systematic practice within Viking culture." She emphasizes that oral traditions often preserve kernels of truth beneath layers of symbolism. Meanwhile, Professor Leif Gunnarsson, a saga scholar, explains, "The blood eagle blends myth and political theatre. It was as much about psychological impact and power projection as about actual practice. Their combined insights reveal a ritual that transcended mere physical execution, operating as a form of cultural and social engineering." Interviews intercut with archaeological footage, animations of skeletal remains, and saga texts enrich the narrative, highlighting the ritual's dual nature, both literal atrocity and metaphorical tool. The ritual's enduring power lies not only in its brutality, but in its ability to invoke awe, dread, and societal cohesion across centuries of Norse memory. A detailed CGI overlay of a human torso illuminates the ribcage, highlighting incision points for the blood eagle. Animated blades slice downward from spine to shoulder, ribs pried outward, and lungs drawn free like wings. The narration somberly indicates, "Here lies the anatomical blueprint of the blood eagle execution, merging surgical precision, ritual terror, and political statement, etched forever into Viking justice." The image lingers, casting a chilling final. The twilight sky bleeds red as the Thingmoot awakens. Torches flickering against the wooden bleachers packed with villagers, nobles, and warriors, their faces shadowed by firelight, eyes fixed on the open arena where justice will be rendered. A heavy silence blankets the gathering, broken only by the distant calls of ravens circling above men's of death and fate. This is no ordinary assembly. The communal space is both court and stage, where law, vengeance, and ritual intertwine. The air is thick with anticipation, the whispers of impending doom weaving through the cool evening breeze. The murmurs of old sagas echo in the minds of those present stories of blood, debt, and divine wrath. Here, beneath the dying light, the village gathers, not merely to witness punishment, but to partake in a collective act of cosmic order, where justice is carved not in words alone, but in flesh and bone. The tension mounts as the crowd waits for the condemned to arrive, their collective breath held in grim expectation. Eric, the condemned noble, is dragged forward, bound in coarse braided leather, his shackles clinking sharply with every heavy step. Once a man of privilege, now reduced to a sacrificial lamb, his fate sealed by betrayal and dishonor. His armor clangs unevenly, worn and dented, a cruel reminder of battles lost beyond the battlefield. As he stumbles through the crowd, faces blur, some etched with sorrow, others gleaming with grim satisfaction. His eyes flicker between friends and foes, catching fleeting glimpses of mourning and anger alike. The path he walks is both public humiliation and the final journey toward oblivion. The murmurs swell into a rising tide of voices, echoing the gravity of his crimes. Each footfall marks an irrevocable step closer to the altar of death, where flesh and spirit will part forever. The crowd's gaze is unrelenting. Eric's passage, a somber procession blending shame, fate, and the heavy weight of law, Beside the altar, Gudrun, the seeress, moves with deliberate grace, her fingers tracing ancient runes in the chilly air. Her soft chants rise and fall like the breath of the gods themselves, weaving invisible wards of protection and sanctity around the execution site. With each syllable, the sacred space is transformed, the boundary between the mortal and the divine blurred. Her presence is both a blessing and a reminder. This is no mere punishment, but a solemn covenant with the gods. The runes she invokes bind fate and flesh, fortifying the executioner's hand and sanctifying the ritual's weight. The flickering torchlight casts dancing shadows that seem to echo the power of her words, as if the stones themselves hum with ancient energy. The murmured prayers intertwine with the crackle of fire and the scent of burning herbs, grounding the ritual in a tapestry of faith and fear. In this moment, brutality is consecrated. Death rendered a sacred duty carried out in Odin's name. In the dim glow of dawn, Bjorn, the executioner, sharpens his curved blade, the infamous eagle beak. Each stroke of the whetstone rings clear, a rhythm echoing centuries of tradition. This is no ordinary weapon. It is a ritual tool, consecrated through solemn ceremony. Bjorn dips the blade into a bowl of fresh goat's blood, letting the crimson liquid drip and coat the steel. The blood sanctifies the weapon, binding it to divine wrath and the execution's sacred purpose. This consecration transforms cold iron into a vessel of ritual power, ready to rend both flesh and spirit. The smell of metallic blood mingles with the damp morning air, thickening the atmosphere with portent. Every movement is deliberate, a dance between precision and reverence. The blade's edge catches the flickering light, gleaming with deadly promise. Bjorn's hands are steady but burdened, carrying the weight of justice, vengeance, and the terrible art he is about to perform. Jarl Harald steps forward, his presence commanding silence across the crowd. His voice, heavy with solemnity, pronounces the verdict. Eric is guilty of treason against kin and king. The words hang in the cold air, carrying finality and dread. The crowd's murmurs swell into a chorus of assent and grief, blending the law's weight with communal resolve. Harold's proclamation is more than judgment, it is the summoning of fate's unyielding hand. At his signal, a deep drumbeat begins, its steady thrum calling forth the inevitable. The crowd tightens, the ritual's gravity settling like a shroud. No appeal will follow, no reprieve is possible. Justice here is public, raw, and irrevocable. The execution is not merely punishment, it's a spectacle of cosmic balance, where betrayal demands blood and order is restored through terror. The drumbeat pulses like a heartbeat, marking the transition from verdict to enactment, binding all present in the shared solemnity of the moment. Jarl Harald steps forward, his presence commanding silence across the crowd. His voice, heavy with solemnity, pronounces the verdict. Eric is guilty of treason against kin and king. The words hang in the cold air, carrying finality and dread. The crowd's murmurs swell into a chorus of assent and grief, blending the law's weight with communal resolve. Harold's proclamation is more than judgment, it is the summoning of fate's unyielding hand. At his signal, a deep drumbeat begins, its steady thrum calling forth the inevitable. The crowd tightens, the ritual's gravity settling like a shroud. No appeal will follow, no reprieve is possible. Justice here is public, raw, and irrevocable. The execution is not merely punishment, it is a spectacle of cosmic balance, where betrayal demands blood, and order is restored through terror. The drumbeat pulses like a heartbeat, marking the transition from verdict to enactment, binding all present in the shared solemnity of the moment. Bjorn raises the eagle beak high, the gleam of steel slicing through the morning light. With a practiced, measured swing, the blade tears into Eric's left ribcage, the wet crack of bone splitting the tense silence. Blood wells instantly, rich and dark, pooling against the cold stone beneath. The crowd gasps, a collective intake of breath, mingling horror and fascination. Bjorn's movements are precise, yet brutal, each cut slicing between ribs from spine to sternum, exposing the fragile lungs beneath. The smell of hot iron and fresh blood fills the air, a visceral reminder of the cost of betrayal. The executioner's hands are steady, guided by tradition and grim duty. Eric's face contorts in agony, breaths shallow and ragged. This first incision marks the beginning of the ritual's full terror dance of flesh and steel, where anatomy and atrocity entwine. The crowd watches, caught between reverence and dread, as the ritual of justice unfolds in vivid detail. Assistants step forward, gripping the exposed ribs with ropes and hooks as Bjorn signals them. With careful but forceful tugs, they peel the loosened ribs outward, pulling crimson lung lobes free from the cavity. The lungs unfold grotesquely, spreading wide like bloody wings draped across Eric's trembling back. The sickening sound of sinew stretching and tearing accompanies this macabre display. Despite the agony, Eric gasps, each breath a desperate defiance as the lungs rise and fall, a haunting spectacle of mortal suffering and ritual symbolism. The crowd recoils, yet cannot look away, witnessing a physical manifestation of myth made flesh. These wings, soaked in blood, serve as a dreadful offering to Odin's ravens, symbols of war, death, and divine retribution. The ritual fuses man to legend, flesh to cosmic narrative, as the condemned becomes both sacrifice and symbol in the eyes of the assembled. Gudrun, the seeress, steps forward with a ceremonial ale horn, her voice rising in sacred chant. She sprinkles the foaming ale over the freshly unfurled lung wings, the liquid glistening as it trickles down the crimson folds. The ritual blesses the sacrifice, sealing Eric's soul to Odin and the eternal battlefield of Valhalla. Jarl Harald lifts the bloody lungs high to catch the fading sunlight, declaring them a sacred offering to the Raven God. The crowd bows their heads in solemn reverence, their murmured prayers mingling with the evening breeze. This final act sanctifies the grisly execution, transforming mortal pain into divine communion. The ale's scent mingles with the metallic temps of blood and the earthy aroma of the gathering place. Through blessing and declaration, the ritual completes its cosmic circuit, tying human justice to divine will and binding the condemned's fate to the gods. As night deepens, Eric's remains are left exposed on the Ultra Macabre theatre, where vultures and crows descend to feast. The skeletal wings, stained dark with dried blood, serve as a stark warning to all who might consider betrayal. Villagers gather at a respectful distance, faces illuminated by torchlight. Their expressions a complex mix of awe, dread, and silent contemplation. The bones become more than remains. They transform into a living message, carved in flesh and memory, a public testament to the price of treason. Stories grow with each telling, the spectacle etched into village lore and culture. The eerie silence, broken only by the calls of scavenging birds, underscores the ritual's ongoing power. For 3 days, this grim display fortifies social order, ensuring that the terrifying legend of the Blood Eagle endures beyond the executioner's axe. Close-ups reveal the wet crack of bone under Bjorn's steel blade, blood spurting in rhythmic pulses. The acrid temps of iron mingles with smoke drifting from nearby ritual fires. The crowd's gasps, whispers, and occasional cries punctuate the tense atmosphere. weaving a haunting tapestry of human emotion. Sweat beads on brows, mingling with the pungent scent of burning herbs and crushed insects used in the rites. The rough texture of leather bindings and the slick, glistening sheen of freshly dyed cloth add tactile depth. The murmurs of ancient incantations echo softly, their cadence carrying the weight of generations. This immersive sensory environment grounds the ritual in lived experience pain. Fear, reverence, and communal catharsis blending into a moment both brutal and sacred. The crowd's faces tell a story of raw human complexity, fear, fascination, sorrow, and grim resolve. Elderly villagers clutch prayer beads. Mothers shield children's eyes while stealing glances. Young warriors stand stiff-backed, steeling themselves for the example set. This public execution transcends punishment. It is a social contract enacted in blood. The crowd's collective gaze becomes a tool wielded by the ruling class, enforcing loyalty through terror. Whispered conversations mingle with reverent silence. As the weight of justice settles deep in hearts, the spectacle serves as a living sermon, binding community members with a shared understanding of law, order, and the harsh consequences of betrayal. Here, social cohesion is forged in the crucible of violence, each witness a participant in the ritual's sustaining power. As night deepens, Jarl Harald steps forward, raising the braided lung wings with solemn authority. He drapes them over his shoulders in a mock coronation, a grim emblem of power forged in blood. The crowd falls silent, the weight of the moment pressing upon them. Harald's face hardens with the burden of leadership, embodying the fusion of death and dominion that defines Viking rule. The ritual's cycle completes, a stark reminder that power demands sacrifice both of others and of oneself. Beneath the star-studded sky, the mock coronation seals the night's grim theatre, where justice, vengeance, and sovereignty intertwine. In this terrible pageant, the soaring wings of death become symbols of order, and the chilling spectacle cements the fragile hierarchy that governs life and death alike. The camera lingers on ancient altar stones, their surfaces deeply inscribed with runes that curve like serpents in the fading light. Dark smears stains of old blood or oxidized rust gloss over the carved symbols, hinting at countless sacrifices offered in ages past. These stones stand as silent sentinels, bearing witness to the terrifying ritual known as the Blood Eagle. The deep grooves and jagged edges tell a story of myth and mortal terror, intertwined marks, not merely of language, but of invocation. Each rune calls upon Odin's raven flock, commanding the spirits to watch over the sacred ground where flesh was torn and souls offered. The altar is more than stone. It is a threshold, a liminal space where human justice and divine will intersect. The shadows play across the runes as the wind whispers ancient prayers, binding mortal sacrifice to celestial power in an eternal covenant. Visuals shift to an artistic rendering, lungs unfurled like crimson wings, spread beneath a sky thick with storm clouds, ravens circling ominously overhead. The narration deepens. The blood spilled during the Blood Eagle was not random. Violence, it was a sacred feast for Odin, the raven god, whose ravenous hunger for valor and vengeance demanded such offerings. The ritual was an agonizing prayer, flesh torn open to nourish divine forces. Every drop of blood was consecrated, every scream a hymn to cosmic justice. This brutal sacrifice reaffirmed the sacred pact between chieftains and God's blood for protection, terror for triumph. It was warfare made holy, an embodiment of Viking courage and ruthlessness. The pulsing red of the lungs echoes the beating heart of a society forged in battle and belief. Here, death was not an end, but a profound, terrifying gifter, raw, physical conduit to power and divine favor. The scene softens to flickering firelight, illuminating a Skalden, oral historian reciting saga verses to an enraptured crowd of villagers seated on rough-hewn benches. His voice rises and falls, weaving tales of the blood eagle, embedding the atrocity deep into communal memory. These stories were more than entertainment, they were social glue, passing warnings from one generation to the next. The sagas transformed the grim act into legend, a public reminder that defiance invited unyielding retribution. Each retelling reinforced clan identity, binding the community through shared horror and reverence for their laws and gods. The vivid imagery of wings carved from flesh and lungs spread wide became symbolic shorthand for justice and divine wrath. Through these sagas, the blood eagle transcended its physical act, becoming a ritual of social cohesion, deterring rivals, uniting allies, and cementing the chieftain's authority with a narrative as powerful as the execution itself. In slow motion, a visualization of ribs being meticulously carved into feather-like shapes unfolds. The narration describes how this act was no mere execution, but a deliberate transformation. The condemned's flesh became a living symbol, mimicking the wings of a bird of prey. The carving of ribs as feathers bridged the human and the divine, turning the victim into a grotesque avatar of the raven god Odin. This ritualized violence was as much about symbolism as pain-flesh was transmuted into a divine emblem, terror into transcendence. The executioner's blade traced sacred patterns, carving mortal anatomy into a powerful mythic figure. The act embodied death as metamorphosis, where the victim's suffering was sanctified, becoming part of a cosmic narrative of power and sacrifice. Through this visceral image, the ritual connected earthly justice to spiritual warfare, turning the condemned into both sacrifice and symbol in the eyes of the community and the gods. The camera shifts to a commanding chieftain overlooking a vast crowd, lungs displayed like trophies spread across a platform. The narration explains how the blood eagle was not only an act of punishment but a calculated performance of political power. By broadcasting such grisly spectacles, rulers broadcast a clear message. Betrayal would be met with divine and mortal wrath without mercy. These public executions were political theatre, reinforcing the Jarl's omnipotence and deterring dissent. The gore was a language fear, made manifest to maintain control and loyalty. Crowds gathered not merely as witnesses but as participants in a ritual that reified social order through horror. The spectacle was a potent reminder that power was absolute, secured by violence, and legitimized by divine sanction. The ritual's terror-welded ruler and ruled in a shared understanding of law and consequence, where the public display of suffering upheld authority through awe and dread. Faces of villagers come into focus, expressions flickering between fear, awe, and resignation. The narration reveals how the Blood Eagle ritual weaponized collective grief and terror to bind the community together. Individual dread was transformed into a shared experience, forging bonds stronger than kinship alone. The communal witnessing of brutal justice created an unspoken social contract, where obedience was enforced through psychological conditioning. Fear became the glue that held clans together, a force that transcended spoken laws to shape behavior and allegiance. The ritual's brutality was not gratuitous but purposeful. By instilling terror and awe simultaneously, it ensured social cohesion under the looming shadow of divine vengeance. The emotional tapestry woven in the crowd whispers, gasps, silent prayers reveals the profound psychological power of ritual violence in maintaining order and reinforcing collective identity. Interview clips show Dr. Sigrid Thompson, a cultural psychologist, speaking thoughtfully. She explains, they weaponized grief and fear uniting clans under the shadow of divine vengeance. Violence became communication, binding society through horror and belief. The narration expands on her insight, illustrating how extreme rituals encode complex power relations. The blood eagle functioned not only as punishment but as a languager, political and spiritual dialect where pain and terror conveyed messages of loyalty, control, and divine favor. The ritual's enduring memory stems from its dual nature as brutal act and symbolic performance, where violence served to both fracture and unify. Through these practices, Vikings transformed raw human suffering into a structured social language, embedding belief systems into corporeal form. This layered communication strengthened the fabric of society, making the most extreme violence a foundational expression of power and faith. The camera slowly fades from the blood-stained altar stones to a raven taking flight against a dusky sky. The narration softens, reflecting on the cultural meaning beneath the brutality. In the Blood Eagle, we glimpse a culture where violence transcended mere cruelty, became sacred language, a fierce dialect of power and faith. The ritual etched a brutal covenant between gods, rulers, and subjects, intertwining fear and belief in a timeless, winged embrace. Violence was not random but purposeful, a profound statement of cosmic order and social hierarchy. Through this rite, death became a theater where sacred and profane met, and power was both asserted and sanctified. The Blood Eagle stands as a stark reminder of how ritualized violence shaped Viking identity, an extreme form of belief that bound community and cosmos through terror and reverence. Echoing long after the echoes of steel faded, close-ups revealed the executioner's arsenal laid out with grim precision. A curved blade gleams sharply under flickering torchlight, its hooked tip shaped like an eagle's beak. Bone hooks, polished smooth from use, rest beside bowls of consecrated ale, their surfaces catching the firelight with a liquid glow. Each tool has been meticulously crafted and carefully consecrated for a purpose beyond mere killing. It is a sacred instrument of ritual terror and exactitude. The eagle beak blade is honed razor-thin to slice flesh cleanly, while the iron hooks promise a brutal grace, designed to grip and extract lungs with a single, practiced pull. The ale, brewed from barley and blessed with chants, serves not just to hydrate but to sanctify, symbolically feeding Odin's raven flock. The scene is silent but charged. These are weapons of divine justice, tools blending surgical skill with sacred meaning, each prepared to enact the most feared execution known to Viking lore. In slow motion, the curved blade arcs smoothly through a wooden rib model, demonstrating its specialized design. Unlike a blunt cleaver, this beak axe follows the natural curve of ribs, enabling precise separation without shattering the bone. The convex edge glides between intercostal muscles, slicing cleanly along the thoracic cage. This design reduces erratic fracturing, preserving the structural integrity necessary to pull back ribs like feathers later. The curvature mirrors the hooked shape of an eagle's beak, symbolic as well as functional, allowing the executioner to mimic the bird's deadly precision. Its balance and weight are calibrated to deliver a controlled, surgical strike, blending brute force with anatomical knowledge. The weapon's form reflects an intimate understanding of human anatomy, showing that the Blood Eagle was not a crude act of brutality, but a practiced and horrifying art, honed through generations to maximize terror while maintaining ritualistic efficacy. Iron hooks are demonstrated gripping faux lung lobes, their sharp tips sinking into delicate tissue analogues. In one fluid motion, the lungs are pulled free from the chest cavity, unfolding like gruesome crimson wings. This required more than raw strength. It demanded a clear understanding of thoracic anatomy and muscle attachments. The executioner's assistants likely practiced the precise angle and force needed to extract the lungs intact, avoiding tearing that would lessen the ritual's visual impact. The motion is swift and rehearsed, designed to create the eerie spectacle of wings spread wide across the condemned's back. This pulling not only exposed the victim's vulnerability, but symbolically transformed him into a raven-winged sacrifice. The technique indicates a specialized apprenticeship among executioners, where anatomical precision met ritual drama, turning physical extraction into a choreographed display of power, horror, and sacred symbolism. Superimposed glowing runes trace along the ribs as an executioner's hand etches sacred symbols alongside the surgical incisions. Each cut was accompanied by specific binding runes, magical glyphs intended to imprison the victim, spirit, and sanctify the act. These rune carvings were not ornamental. They invoked divine authority, transforming the execution from mere punishment into a sacred ritual. The glowing strokes shimmer as the executioner chants invocations to Odin, calling on his ravens to claim the offering. The runes functioned as spiritual seals, ensuring the condemned soul could not escape divine judgment. This ritual layering combining physical mutilation with spiritual bondage amplified the terror and reinforced social control. The blending of blade and magic underscores the Viking worldview, where violence and sacred power were inseparable, and every act of execution was also an act of cosmic significance. Ale, brewed from barley and blessed in sacred rites, is poured slowly over the exposed ribs and crimson lungs, causing the wet surfaces to glisten in torchlight. This was more than a practical measure to hydrate and slow tissue decay, symbolized feeding Odin's raven flock, the divine messengers who consumed the blood of the fallen. The ale acted as a ritual fixative, preserving the wings longer for public display and spiritual potency. As the liquid trickled down, the executioner murmured blessings, invoking Odin's favor and binding the victim's sacrifice to the divine appetite. The rich aroma of fermented barley mingled with the metallic scent of blood, intensifying the sensory assault. This act sealed the covenant between mortal death and divine consumption, reinforcing the sacred nature of the execution. The blood and ale together embodied the physical and spiritual sustenance offered to Odin, completing the sacrificial circuit of terror and worship. Interview footage cuts to Professor Marcus Reed, forensic anatomist, speaking confidently. The precision required to execute the blood eagle indicates detailed anatomical knowledge. Executioners understood chest cavity structure and muscle attachments intimately. Accompanying anatomical diagrams highlight the complexity of rib separation and lung extraction. Reed explains that such surgical skill suggests ritual specialists trained extensively, blending physical prowess with spiritual obligation. The cuts had to be precise to preserve the lungs' integrity and maximize the spectacle, meaning this was far from a crude act. His analysis positions the blood eagle as a dark blend of medicine, craft, and terror. The interview intercuts with footage of historic Viking tools and detailed skeletal models, illustrating how anatomical mastery was weaponized in the service of ritual justice. This perspective reframes the execution as a horrific, yet methodical performance requiring expertise, patience, and chilling commitment. Dr. Ingrid Falk, ritual specialist, demonstrates carving motions with a replica eagle beak blade, her voice measured and grave. Each incision was choreographed, merging surgical skill with sacred ceremony. The blood eagle was not only an act of violence, but a sacrament and offering to the gods, where physical destruction and spiritual transformation coincided. She explains how the ritual straddled the line between execution and holy rite, where the mutilated body became a symbol of cosmic order and divine retribution. Falk's demonstration highlights the ritual's dual nature, emphasizing that every cut had meaning beyond the physical. Each slice was an invocation, a statement of power and belief. The segment blends practical anatomy with cultural symbolism, showing how the blood eagle was carefully scripted theater designed to sanctify violence, enforce authority, and terrify subjects into submission. A translucent human torso appears, animated to show the blood eagle's precise choreography. A curved blade slicing through ribs, iron hooks placed just so to extract lungs, runes glowing as they are carved along the bones. The visualization layers ritual and anatomy, revealing the calculated artistry behind the brutal act. The blade path follows a clean curve, preserving ribs as feather-like extensions. Hook placement is exact, designed for swift lung removal. Rune etchings shimmer, marking sacred inscriptions binding the victim's spirit. The scene is accompanied by low, haunting chanting, underscoring the ceremony's gravity. This anatomical ritual map transforms the blood eagle from myth to method, showing the blend of surgical precision and sacred performance. Through this lens, the execution emerges as a chilling fusion of craft, cruelty, and cosmic symbolism. Ritual terror engineered with terrifying care. The camera fades from the animated overlay to flickering torchlight dancing across rune-inscribed stones. The narration reflects, beneath the horror lies calculated mastery, terror refined into precise, ritualized technique. Every cut, every rune, every drop of ale was designed to enforce obedience through awe and fear. The blood eagle stands as a grim testament to Viking ingenuity, a fusion of craft and cruelty that wielded pain as political and spiritual currency. This was not blind savagery, but an engineered performance, where ritual and anatomy combined to bind social order with blood and wings. The chilling efficiency of the executioner's choreography reveals how deeply ritual violence shaped Viking society, turning extreme terror into a structured tool of power, loyalty, and belief. The flickering shadows embody this dark artistry, leaving viewers to contemplate how terror, precision, and faith intertwined in the world of the Vikings. A sterile execution chamber glows under harsh fluorescent lights. A pristine gurney, wired with intravenous lines, stands ready, surrounded by gleaming medical equipment and stark white walls that enclose the space in clinical coldness. The faint hum of machines and the soft shuffle of footsteps break the silence. Though sanitized and orderly, this space carries the unshakable weight of mortality and state power. We recoil at lethal injections and electric chairs, rituals scrubbed clean to satisfy a society that demands distance from death's brutality. Yet beneath this veneer lies a primal impulse to administer death not just as punishment, but as a public spectacle, a final assertion of justice. In contrast, a scene from the Old West emerges, rough-hewn gallows standing against the open sky. A noose swaying gently as a crowd gathers in hushed anticipation. The camera cuts to a torchlit Viking thing gathering, an amphitheater ablaze with firelight, filled with shouting voices and the tense energy of thousands witnessing sacred justice. Chains rattle as the condemned is dragged forward, the scent of smoke and sweat thick in the air. No anesthesia dulls the senses here. No glass walls separate executioners and onlookers. The blood eagle unfolds with grim precision, ribs, severed lungs pulled free and spread wide like the wings of a raven soaring into the sky. The visceral sound of cracking bone and the dripping of blood echo through the night, a terrifying reminder that justice once was raw, public, and deeply rich. Today, execution technology has evolved dramatically. Slow-motion footage shows the quiet injection of chemicals. Monitors tracking steady declines in vital signs, clinical, controlled, precise, cut back to reenacted scenes of an executioner's curved blade slicing expertly between ribs. Anatomical models highlighting the blood eagle's surgical choreography. Ribs cleanly separated, lungs carefully extracted. The juxtaposition reveals that while methods have become more refined and humane in appearance, the core intent remains unchanged. Death is still a controlled, deliberate act, where society exerts authority over the final breath. The sterile silence of modern chambers replaces the crack of bone. But the human need to control and ritualize death's passage persists. This control extends to who witnesses the act. Modern execution chambers forbid cameras, restrict visitors, and veil the process in secrecy. In stark contrast, Viking society broadcast its justice openly, with skalds reciting saga verses to crowds gathered beneath the stars. The roar of firelight and voice melded with the spectacle of brutal executions, embedding lessons of power and retribution deep within communal memory. Both ancient and modern societies manage fear and reinforce social order through shaping the narrative of death. But Vikings embraced visibility as a tool to awe and terrify, while today's culture conceals to regulate and contain. The legal framework also differs sharply. In contemporary courts, death sentences are solemnly decreed by judges within institutional walls. Viking executions fused legal condemnation with religious ritual, transforming punishment into cosmic spectacle. Flames, runes, and sacred blades intertwined with judgment, underscoring the chieftain's divine authority. This blending of law and religion elevated execution from mere penalty to sacred act, reinforcing social hierarchies and divine favor in one terrifying moment. Experts reflect on these parallels. Dr. Emma Clark, a forensic ethicist, notes, while execution methods have evolved, society's need for ritual closure around death remains unwavering. Sociologist Dr. Navin Patel observes, executions mirror the deepest fears and values of their times, scripted anew with each generation. Their voices underscore that beneath changing forms and technology, executions serve as profound cultural rituals, vehicles of meaning, control, and collective identity. Montage sequences fade through stark Viking burial sites, scenes of medieval execution grounds, and modern death row facilities bathed in clinical light. Flickering candles cast dancing shadows over stone monuments and sterile walls alike. The blood eagle's savage terror persists as a haunting symbol of primal justice, a distant echo resonating within humanity's timeless ritual to sacralize death and wield power through fear. Though barbaric by modern standards, it sits within a continuum where death's administration, no matter the era, binds societies through ritual, awe, and collective memory. The scene softens to candlelit vigils, silent memorials, and hands clasped in mourning across centuries and cultures. Death rituals reveal more than punishment. They express shared meaning, social cohesion, and humanity's enduring struggle with mortality. The blood eagle challenges us to reflect on how we have shaped the power and purpose of death across time, culture, and conscience, inviting contemplation of death as both an ending and a cultural force that continues to define our shared humanity. The first pale light of dawn stretches softly across a silent heath, where distant burial mounds lie cloaked in morning mist. A faint whisper rides the cold air, the call of ravens circling high above, their cries weaving through the stillness like echoes from the past. The blood eagle remains the apex of Viking execution, a grisly convergence of precise anatomy, ritual magic, and calculated terror. This was not mere punishment, but a spectacle of power, where justice demanded display as much as decree, and vengeance was carved in bone and blood. Bjorn, the executioner, moves with solemn finality, sheathing his curved blade as he stands before a rune-inscribed altar. The weight of duty settles upon him, his role, both sacred and terrible, fulfilled. Meanwhile, far removed in time, yet somehow connected, a modern observer closes the screen of an execution live stream, a shiver passing through them. Though centuries have passed, the echoes of death's pageantry still reverberate. A reminder that beneath our civilized veneers lurk primal rituals of control and spectacle. We like to think justice has tamed its fury, but the scars of ritual violence run deep within human history. By unearthing the blood eagle, we confront a haunting intersection where belief, cruelty, and power fused into one grotesque performance. It challenges us, when we debate punishment and retribution. How far will we truly go in the name of justice and vengeance? A single raven feather floats slowly down, drifting across a blood-darkened stone. It lands, gently, an enduring symbol of death's theatre, where ancient terror still casts its long, unyielding shadow.